is a reason the skies over the Middle East go completely silent when the B-1B Lancer takes off. Capable of carrying the largest conventional payload of both guided and unguided weapons in the U.S. Air Force inventory, this supersonic beast can decimate targets before the enemy even registers a threat on radar. But what makes it so terrifying to nations like Iran isn't just its payload, it's a classified strike profile that makes interception almost impossible. Picture this. It's the dead of night, high above the arid terrain of the Middle East. A sleek, swept-wing bomber cuts through the thin air at Mach 1.2. It doesn't look like a traditional heavy bomber. It looks like a fighter jet that was supersized in a classified lab. This is the B-1B Lancer, affectionately known by its crews as the Bone. Born in the tense, high-stakes atmosphere of the Cold War, the Bone was originally designed to penetrate Soviet airspace at low altitudes, flying under the radar to deliver a nuclear payload. But today, its mission has evolved into something far more precise and arguably much more deadly. Before we break down exactly how this bomber executed one of the most flawless strike missions of the modern era, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on global air superiority and next-gen defense tech, subscribe to the channel. We uncover the classified truths and raw engineering of the world's most lethal machines every single week. To understand why adversarial nations panic when the Bone is deployed, you have to look at the numbers. We aren't just talking about a plane that drops a few bombs and heads home. We are looking at a platform that can carry 75,000 pounds of internal payload. That's 84 Mk-82 general-purpose bombs, or 24 joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, known as JASSMs. When it sweeps its wings back to a 67.5-degree angle, it reduces its aerodynamic drag to an absolute minimum, allowing its 4 General Electric F-101 turbofan engines to kick into full afterburner. That means it can dash into a combat zone, deliver utter devastation, and egress before hostile surface-to-air missile batteries can even lock on. But here's the thing. Despite its overwhelming speed and payload, the B-1B is not a stealth bomber. It doesn't have the radar-absorbing geometry of the B-2 Spirit. So how exactly does a massive, non-stealth aircraft operate with near impunity in some of the most heavily defended airspace on the planet? There is a highly specific tactical maneuver and an electronic warfare suite on board that effectively blinds enemy operators. But there is a fatal flaw in the way these missions are run, one that the Pentagon tries very hard not to talk about. We'll get to exactly what that vulnerability is in just a minute. Let's look at the recent strikes. When tensions boiled over and retaliation was ordered, the U.S. didn't rely solely on drones or carrier-based fighter jets. They launched the Lancers directly from Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, flying a grueling non-stop mission across the globe. You might wonder why. Why fly thousands of miles when you have assets positioned right there in the region? It's about sending a message. It's power projection in its purest form. The ability to launch from the continental United States, hit targets on another continent with pinpoint accuracy, and return home without ever landing on foreign soil changes the entire strategic calculus for regimes that think they are out of reach. But executing a globe-spanning strike like this pushes the airframes and the crews to the absolute breaking point. There is an unseen toll these missions take on the fleet, and the real truth behind the B-1B's hidden maintenance nightmare is something that might actually end its reign of terror sooner than anyone expects. To understand how the Bone survives in hostile skies without stealth, you have to look deep inside its electronic brain. When it enters a highly contested engagement zone, it relies on the AN-OL-1ASH defensive avionics system. This isn't just a basic radar jammer. It's an incredibly sophisticated electronic warfare suite that detects, identifies, and jams hostile radar signals in milliseconds. It creates a massive bubble of electronic static around the airframe. While an S-400 missile battery might know there's something out there, getting a weapons-grade lock on a B-1B blasting electronic noise while hugging the terrain at 500 feet is a completely different story. The Bone uses the curvature of the Earth and the terrain itself to mask its approach. By the time enemy radar can successfully paint the target, the Lancer has already deployed its payload and is pulling a high G-turn to exit the combat zone at supersonic speeds. And when we talk about that payload, the reality of what this jet can do in a live combat scenario is staggering. During the retaliatory strikes against Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq and Syria, the B-1Bs didn't just drop a few dumb bombs. They unleashed dozens of precision-guided munitions simultaneously, hitting over 85 individual targets across 7 separate facilities. The sheer processing power required to calculate trajectory, wind speed, and target coordinates for that many weapons moving at Mach 1.2 is insane. Each Joint Direct Attack Munition, or JDAM, requires split-second timing. The B-1B's Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod allows the crew to identify and designate targets from miles away, feeding that data directly into the weapon systems. The destruction was absolute. Command and control centers, intelligence facilities, and logistics hubs were erased from the map in a matter of minutes. But running a massive supersonic bomber at high speeds, just hundreds of feet off the ground, creates a severe aerodynamic toll on the airframe. And that brings us to the fatal flaw the Pentagon tries to keep quiet. The B-1B was originally designed for high-altitude nuclear deterrence and rapid low-level penetration. But for the last 2 decades in the Middle East, it's been used heavily as a close air support platform. It essentially functioned as a giant, heavily armed loitering drone, flying in circles for hours at medium altitudes waiting for ground troops to call in airstrikes. This constant, grinding use in a role it wasn't originally engineered for has absolutely ravaged the fleet. We are talking about structural fatigue that the original designers never foresaw. Wing attachment points cracking under the strain. Engine nacelles enduring severe stress fractures. At one point just a few years ago, out of the 62 Lancers in the active inventory, less than 10 were fully mission capable. The U.S. Air Force had to forcefully retire 17 of the most damaged airframes just to cannibalize them for spare parts. The maintenance hours required for every single flight hour of a B-1B are astronomical. For every hour the bone spends dropping ordnance, it requires dozens of hours in the hangar. It's a logistical nightmare that costs taxpayers billions. The operating cost per flight hour is estimated to be well over $60,000. It requires specialized technicians working around the clock just to keep the complex avionics and hydraulics from failing mid-flight. Yet, despite these crippling maintenance issues, the Air Force isn't just keeping the remaining fleet alive, they are giving it one of the most terrifying, classified weapon upgrades in aviation history. An upgrade so lethal that it shifts the balance of power not just in the Middle East, but across the entire Pacific. Because the B-1B is about to carry a weapon system it was never supposed to have. And when you see what they are mounting to its external pylons, you'll realize why the world's superpowers are watching this aging bomber with genuine fear. The Air Force isn't just fixing the broken airframes. They are radically transforming the B-1B from a conventional bomber into a hypersonic missile truck. For decades, the B-1B carried its weapons entirely inside its massive internal bomb bays. It was actually forbidden by international arms reduction treaties with Russia from using its external hardpoints for nuclear cruise missiles. But with those treaties now falling apart and global tensions at a boiling point, the Air Force has physically reactivated those external pylons. And they aren't mounting old Cold War tech. They are preparing the Lancer to carry the ARRW, the Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon. This is a hypersonic glide vehicle capable of flying at speeds exceeding Mach 20. Let that sink in for a second. Mach 20. That is over 15,000 miles per hour. When an ARRW is dropped from the external pylon of the B-1B, a solid rocket booster ignites, propelling the warhead to hypersonic speeds at the very edge of the Earth's atmosphere. Then, the glide vehicle detaches and literally surfs the atmosphere down to its target. Because it doesn't follow a predictable ballistic arc like a traditional missile, enemy radar cannot calculate where it is going to land. It can maneuver mid-flight. At that speed, there is no air defense system on the planet, not the Russian S-500, not the Chinese HQ-9, and certainly nothing in Iran's arsenal that can track, intercept, or destroy it. Imagine being an adversarial commander knowing that a bomber you can't even see yet just launched a weapon that will obliterate your bunker in less than 10 minutes. There is no bunker deep enough and no reinforced concrete thick enough to survive the sheer kinetic energy of an impact at Mach 20. The B-1B can theoretically carry up to 31 hypersonic missiles if fully loaded internally and externally. This completely shifts the paradigm of modern warfare. A single B-1B Lancer taking off from Guam or Diego Garcia could launch a devastating hypersonic strike against an adversarial carrier strike group or a deeply buried command bunker from thousands of miles away, entirely out of range of enemy interceptors. This is exactly why the military is willing to absorb the excruciating maintenance costs. Yes, the airframe is tired. Yes, the mechanics are working overtime just to keep the wings attached. But the sheer lethality of pairing a supersonic, terrain-hugging bomber with unstoppable hypersonic missiles makes it an irreplaceable asset. The Pentagon knows they cannot rely entirely on the B-2 Spirit, which is incredibly expensive to operate and exists in very limited numbers. And the upcoming B-21 Raider, while a technological marvel of stealth, is still years away from full operational capability in the mass numbers required to fight a global conflict. The bone bridges that critical gap. It is the brute force hammer in a world that is increasingly obsessed with delicate stealth scalpels. And this brings us to the ultimate truth about the B-1B Lancer. It was a weapon born for a war that never happened, repurposed for a desert insurgency it was never built for. And now, it is being resurrected as the ultimate deterrent against near-peer adversaries. It refuses to die, because the United States simply cannot afford to let it die. The next time you hear about a B-1B deployment to the Middle East or the Indo-Pacific, understand that it's not just a show of force. It is a highly calculated warning. A reminder that while stealth gets all the glory, raw, overwhelming firepower still dictates the rules of engagement. If you respect the engineering behind the world's most lethal machines and want to stay ahead of the curve on global air superiority, subscribe to the channel. We uncover the classified truths every week.